And a huge thank you to all of our Patreons.
Thank you to the Pit Fighters, the First Swords, and all of the Bright Stars, Truth and Courage.
We love books, and more importantly today, we love self-published books.
Yes, we do.
We have invited a whole host of wonderful, generous, kind, intuitive booktubers onto our channel to talk to us about what their favourite self-published books are, and we cannot wait to hear their choices.
Hey, what's up, bookworms? Ed and Will dropped in and said, hey, Mike, what is your favorite self-published book that you've read? For me, I had to think about this for about 3 seconds. It was Of War and Ruin by Ryan Cahill. Was and still is. This is one when I first saw it, I said, this is what's wrong with self-publishing. They need an editor. And then I read the book and I was like, oh my God, that book could have been longer and I would have been quite happy. What's amazing about this book is not only is there zero fluff in it, he's got about 13 to 15 different plot threads going on in it, and every single one of them land. Absolutely amazing. When you think that this book is as long, maybe longer than A Storm of Swords by George R. R. Martin, which is maybe my favorite fantasy book of all time, it's one of those where I feel like the flow was very comparable in that regard. And I can't think, there's not really a higher compliment that I can give it than that. The fact that he's able to pull off that many threads, that many characters, and every single one of them land in a book that's this long, and you're not exhausted at the end, you want to keep going, I think Ryan did something right there.
Hey, Will. Hey, Ed. Thanks for having us on. One of my favorite indie published books is Dungeon Crawler Carl. Ooh. The audiobook is amazing. One of the best audiobook experiences I've ever had by Sound Booth Theater, Jeff Hayes. One of the reasons why I love it. But overall, it's an exciting, like, nail-biting series with tons of laugh-out-loud moments, and I love the characters.
They are awesome characters, but they're great books. My favorite self-published book of all time is one of my favorite books of all time. It's no surprise. You guys love it too. They reviewed it on their channel. The Gwyn Bros, they're the best. The Sword of frickin' Kaigen has not only the best characters, emotional moments, thought-provokingness, world. Every single aspect of this world is real. The characters are real. I have never cared so much about a book. This is a masterpiece.
I also love it too. It's one of my favorite books too.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on, guys.
Thanks.
It's Kristen and Maddie from Chris and Mads. The Book Brothers of the Internet invited us book sisters to talk about two of our favorite indie authors. So I'm going to start with Ryan Cahill, who wrote The Bound and the Broken. I love this series so much. It's just nostalgic medieval fantasy. It focuses on found family, courage, navigating right and wrong, all the stuff we love, and there's dragons. And I think it's so cool to see how Ryan has developed as an author through this series. His latest books are blowing my mind.
The indie author that I am bringing to the table is M.L. Wang. I just read The Sword of Kaigen, and not to be dramatic, but this is one of the best books of my entire lifetime. Emma Wang is a great writer when it comes to emotions and the human experience. She takes you into this total immersive setting where you are there with the characters, almost like a film, but then you feel it like you're laying in the snow with them when they feel grief, when they feel love. So I highly recommend this author if you want to get into the emotions. But also Maddie read Blood Over Bright Haven, which is her newest book, and Maddie loved this so much. I'm really excited to jump in soon.
Blood Over Bright Haven is actually so successful that it has been picked up by traditional publishers, but we'll always consider Emma Wang to be indie first.
Thanks for inviting us, guys.
We're just going to throw ourselves into this bit of the video. We're going to talk about two of our favourite self-published books that we both actually read, so we'll both be raving about both. And we'll try to stick to the same rule of being quite short and sharp. First up, we have The Sword of Kaigen. We have a review on the channel if you want to check that out properly. What makes you love this book, Ed? I love how unique and independent it is. I think the way that it is self-published actually plays as a major strength, that it was only shaped by M.L. Wang's vision of what the Sword of Kaigen was going to be. I love this book because of its two character studies that are just sublime and take fantasy, in my opinion, in a completely new direction. I love the setting. I love the kind of the Japanese, the samurai feel to it. I love the action, but more importantly, I love the characters and the heart at the story. Yep, we are character-driven readers, and this is a character-driven story. And what else do we have, Ed? Of course, we can't have a self-published book video without mentioning Dr. Fantasy, Dr. Philip Chase's The Way of Edan, book one of the Edan trilogy. Now, we love that series.
We do.
We love this series in particular because of
the supreme vibes of Lord of the Rings meets David Gemmell
I was
meets
going to say, wasn't your
Banished
quote
Lands.
David Gemmell's characters in Lord of the Rings landscapes?
Yeah, they've invaded the landscape
Wow.
of Lord of the Rings. And to me, Philip Chase is someone who writes with panache, with vim and vigor, with excitement, and he is not afraid to, punch the reader in the heart.
I do
And
agree.
He does so quite a few times.
He really does. It's the perfect blend of classic and modern fantasy. I find many of those beats of traditional fantasy, but then he subverts them. He doesn't have that fear. He has that modern approach as well. He will change your perception of the fantasy genre with this, especially with the conclusion of the trilogy. I still think about that so much, how he went so far against my expectations, but in such a satisfying way.
And in my opinion, there is one character in fantasy that is more divisive than any other, and it is Tom Bombadil. And this is a series for people who love Tom Bombadil, and it's also a series for people who hate Tom Bombadil, because if you don't like him because of his silly songs, there are songs in this book that are incredible. There are stories that are incredible, that blow Tom Bombadil out of the water. But if you like Tom Bombadil, you'll love this series.
That is Ed's pitch.
That's my pitch.
Hello, Ed and Will. Thank you so much for inviting me to share with you one of my very favorite self-published fantasies. And I'm going to be talking about the Sundered Nation trilogy by Von Roycroft. So far, we have The Severing Sun, Book 1, and Bold Ascension, Book 2, with Book 3 coming out very soon. This is a historical fantasy with a lot of inspiration from the Goths and the Romans and the conflict between them. It is an incredibly epic and sweeping tale that has a protagonist that is complex, someone that you can get behind but also get very frustrated with. So there's some just beautiful character work with some excellent supporting characters as well. But I just love that kind of vibe, historical fantasy, ancient times. If you love that sort of thing, then I encourage you to give the Sundered Nation trilogy a try.
Hi, Ed and Will, my brothers. You asked me to appear on your channel to talk about my favorite self-published fantasy book of all time. And well, I think both of you have actually read this book, and my answer hasn't changed yet. It is still the same. It is still The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. There is no doubt that this is my favorite self-published fantasy book of all time, and I think it is a masterpiece when it comes to the matter of characterizations and also battle scenes, but more importantly, emotional impact. It's really hard to beat what M.L. Wang has done with The Sword of Kaigen here, and I just did a second read of The Sword of Kaigen earlier this year, and it is just as good as the first time I read through it. Truly a masterpiece, and if I have to choose only one best self-published fantasy book, it is without a doubt The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang.
What's up? Smitty here. Some of y'all know me from Book Talk, but I'm also on Booktube as well. And the Brothers Gwyn actually asked me, what is my favorite self-published piece of work? This was a no-brainer for me. It has to be The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. I read this late last year, and this turned out to be not only one of the best reads of last year for me, but one of the best reads of all time for me. This is a Japanese-inspired fantasy, and it follows a family as they protect the Sword of Kaigen, and they've been lied to by the government, they've been lied to by a lot of different people about how far the war is away from them. The war is actually pretty close to them. And in this one, it's just heartbreaking thing after heartbreaking thing, but there's hope and there's love. And this one taught me a lot, more than what I think a fantasy book should. If you haven't read this one, definitely check it out.
Hello, Will and Ed. Thank you so much for having me on your awesome channel. And my favorite self-published book is Of War and Ruin. This is book 3 of The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. And God, this thing just slaps. This whole series made me almost kind of rethink my incorrect previous stance about self-published books as, being, at least a little step back from published books, because this feels like it's like the top of the perfect epic fantasies that the huge major publishers are going to be pumping out. I mean, this feels like, indiscernible from the quality of some of the greats, like, The Wheel of Time, A Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, this is right up there with them. So many amazing things are going on here that I can't ruin for any of you, but needless to say, In true epic fantasy form, each of these 3 books that I've read so far in the main series have gotten bigger and better and cooler and more epic, and I cannot wait to read more of them. Check this series out. This author's incredible, and I'm confident if you like epic fantasy that you are going to love it as well.
The Brothers Gwyn, thank you so much for including me on this, but this is kind of like a booktuber Sophie's choice to narrow this down. I kind of got it narrowed down. There's no way I could just choose one, but I mean, some of my favorite self-published indie series or books going right now, I gotta go with Jacqueline Hagan, The Wickwire Watch. This is such an amazing genre blender of so many flavors. It's a smorgasbord all of its own. It's steampunk, it's Dickensian, it's a mystery, it's horror, it's... Imagine what you want out of a book, and it is in there. What about Dr. Philip Chase's The Way of a Dan trilogy? You take a lifetime of chasing after story and trying to figure out how it works. You add a little bit of Eastern mysticism, and then you pepper it with your own spiritual journey that you bring to these pages for something that just hit me profoundly right down deep to my soul. What about some great Dragon Rider fantasy? I love Michael R. Miller's Songs of Chaos series because the whole thing focuses around compassion and empathy and the drawing together of these two souls as the magic system grows and burgeons in Ash and Holt as they come together to create true magic between the two of them. I just finished Tori Tekken's Bloodstone. This has the chance of being one of my favorite series, period. I can't wait for book 2. I mean, yes, there's giant battles in this Asian-inspired fantasy, but it's also so intimate. The lens is so closely focused on the character that every time the battle happens, there's a price to be paid of their psyche. What is this trauma going to do to them? How is the bill going to come due in forward days moving on? It's just absolutely an amazing character journey that's drawn down so close to these characters and so intimate, and I can't wait to continue the journey with them. And these are just a few flavors. You guys know how amazing indie self-pub fantasy can be out there. This is a literary Lay's potato chip moment. I am gonna fail. I cannot pick just one. If you haven't started your journey into self-pub indie fantasy, now is the time. Give it a shot. My name is John Minton, and this has been Talking Story.
Hey, Will and Ed, thank you so much for having me on here. It's an absolute honor. I love reading self-pub, and I'm super excited to talk about it today. And hello to everyone else. My name is Dylan. I go by Spaced Out Wizard. The first series that came to mind when Will and Ed asked me about self-pub was the lit RPG series Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinnerman. But that just recently got picked up by a publisher for the first few books of that series, so we can't talk about that. So the next series that came to mind is The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. Think The Faithful and the Fallen meets Aragon. Absolutely incredible, but it's not finished yet, so we won't talk about that one either. So what we will be talking about today is one of my favorite trilogies of all time and one of my favorite grimdark series of all time, and that's The Queen of Thieves by Andy Peliquin. This is super grimdark, heist-themed, fast-paced fantasy. This is a single POV story set in one city where we're following a girl as she is sold into the Night Guild by her father to pay off his debts. The Night Guild is like a thieving crime gang, and we follow Viola in book 1 as she goes through her apprenticeship in the guild and performs an epic heist at the end. Then in book 2 of the series, we see Viola perform the biggest heist the guild has ever seen. And then in book 3, Queen of the Night Guild, we see Viola and the Night Guild have to take on a rival crime gang trying to destroy her city. These books are short, fast-paced, action-packed, and just full of fun. Andy's writing is just super easy to read, and if you're just looking for something to break through a slump that's just super fast-paced, you need to check this out.
I'm Ben from Books with Genghis Khan. Thank you, Brothers Gwyn, for having me on to talk about my favorite self-published book, which would be Becoming a Druid by Mike Mullman. Book 1 of the 7-book Protectors of Brittany series. This one did such a great job in sweeping me away to an alternate ancient Britain where the Druids are holding sway in a very powerful institution still. And our protagonist, Grami, is a Druid apprentice, but he's been apprentice for far too long because he does not get along well with others. At the same time, very clever, very sensitive to nature, communing with animals to do all sorts of great animal transformations, and he gets sent on a quest that is high stakes and dangerous that he must fulfill to become a full Druid. So this is a kind of classic quest fantasy book, and told in such an engaging way with the people we meet along the way, the different Druid orders. The Druid magic is so cool to explore, the elemental magic, weather magic, and it got darker and grittier than I was expecting, and it set up an epic conflict to come. It was an immersive, character-driven story with a protagonist who ended up feeling quite relatable to me in particular. So just a wonderful start to a series.
Thank you so much, Ed and Will, for asking me to be a part of this collaboration. Choosing my favorite self-pub or indie pub book is so difficult, considering how many of them I've read at this point, being a SPIFBO judge, all of that. And while I have a lot of books that could have been mentioned here, the one that I think about the most, and the one that clearly, which I'll show you in a moment, has an obscene number of tabs in it, would be Legacy of the Bright Wash by Crystal Matar. You can see the obscene number of tabs in here. I think about this book so frequently. There really could have been no other choice for this. It lives in my head rent-free. Essentially, this is a genre blend of steampunk, grimdark, grim hope, kind of those three things blended together, along with a murder mystery. So we follow our main character Tashue, who is an enforcer in his world, and his job is to make sure that the tainted or the talented, depending on who you talk to, there are different words used for this group of people, but those who manifest magic, essentially. He makes sure that they do what they're supposed to be doing in society, which is essentially serve indentured servitude to the government. And one day he finds a young girl with her arms and her legs cut off on the shore of the river, the Bright Wash, that runs through his city, and no one seems to be interested in what happened to her. But he is very much interested. And through starting that investigation, he starts to discover some things that maybe are not what they seem in his society. It is so beautifully written. The emotions jump off the page. The sense of place is incredible. And like I said, it lives in my head rent-free. There are characters in here that I would die for. So if any of that sounds up your alley, I would highly recommend that you check out Legacy of the Bright Wash.
And hey, we're back. We're cheating. It's our video. We thought we were allowed to cheat. We're now going to talk about two others that the other brother has not read, but we really want them to, that we love. So I've got Yellow Sky Revolt. This is historical fiction, self-published fiction about the Three Kingdoms Chronicles, a war in ancient China.
If you may know Dynasty Warriors.
Exactly. Dynasty Warriors, you will know it. And Ed, you love Dynasty Warriors. How have you not read this yet? It is brilliant writing. This one especially is a coming-of-age story, as we have an old man telling the story of his past. That's the premise of the whole series, but this, of course, is in chronological order. So we follow him from when he's a young child. And, of course, he has less agency, but it's done in such a riveting way.
I pinky promise I will read them this year.
When will you read them?
Have you read them?
Will you read them? Maybe.
Maybe. Anyway, the next one for me is A Drowned Kingdom by P.L. Stewart. Anyone in the fantasy community here on BookTube or on X/Twitter.
I'm sorry I haven't read it yet.
Well, I was saying, we all know that PL is probably in our top 3 favourite people.
He's
a fantastic guy. He's a great person, kind, generous, caring. What more can you ask for?
And we loved our chat with him.
And P.L. Stewart has written A Drowned Kingdom. And this book takes an interesting character at the centre of the POV. And he is the second prince to a mighty kingdom. But the kingdom has fallen, and it is up to this prince to kind of bring them back up to the glory days. And I love his intriguing POV because he is such a different character to what I think I've read in any other book, really. He is a bit of a prig. He's a bit of a wally, and I really enjoy his kind of internal monologue. I absolutely love it. He's a great character. He brings something new to the genre, and P.L. Stewart's series is quickly becoming one of my favourites.
Very nice, and I'll also be reading that at some point.
Words said often.
So that's everyone. Thank you so much to the booktubers who gave their time to talk about their favourite self-published works. Please let us know some of your favourites in the comments below. We'd love to chat about them and find more recommendations down there. But for now, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Truth and Courage, the Brothers Gwyn.
Truth and Courage.